What's up? What's happening? Welcome in on a Monday. It's the Hoffman Show. We are on the Team 980. We are always live as well on the free Odyssey app, and we're streaming live on YouTube at the Team 980, even though we haven't updated the graphic there yet. It's not April 12th. You're not in a time warp. I just need to change the date on the graphic. Everything's fine. Everything's going great. Ant, how was your weekend? Did you survive King's Dominion? Did you just survive the shenanigans with the kids being on duty all weekend at prep?
Yes, I did. And you want to know what's actually crazy? And I was just telling Rooster this. So right before I walked into King's Dominion, my tax person called me back.
Oh, yeah. Just real quick, before we go any further, reminder, if you haven't done your taxes yet, it's not too late yet, but today's the day, so you better immediately do that.
Yeah, you better do that, or they will find you. But yeah, my tax guy called me back, and at first I was using, I'm not even gonna say the name. I was using
an online service.
Yes, to do my taxes, and initially they had me set to pay $2,000. Craig, $2,000.
It's less than I wound up having to pay this year, but that's because I got 1099 money anyway.
But my dad, he ended up giving me his tax guy's number. His tax guy got me squared away. Just had to pay $200. And guess what, Craig? I got me a refund.
Nice.
I couldn't believe it.
That's great for you. I definitely did not get a refund. That's okay. I did think I was getting one for a moment, though. I wasn't planning on telling this story to start the show, but, you know, we'll talk about Dave Gardi, the new guy who got hired by the Commanders, because I think that's actually a very significant hire. We'll talk about that in a moment. But as we sit here on April 15th, on tax day, I will tell you this story because it is really funny, and then we'll get into Dave Gardi. We'll talk WNBA draft, obviously, today. We'll talk about the Wizards season coming to an end. You'll hear from Dane Brugler on the NFL draft before the end of the hour. We got a loaded show. But since we're in story time, my cousin is my accountant, and it's not just like, oh, I got my cousin the accountant. My cousin's actually an accountant. Like, that's his job. He works on like major stuff and then also does our and, you know, some other family taxes. But mostly he does like giant businesses. And so I'm on the phone with him yesterday. And this goober had told me, you know, hey, you're going to owe big time in DC, but federal, you don't owe anything. I was like, cool. At least we got one of the W-4s, right? And so all of a sudden we're on the phone and he's like, so you have a little bit back from federal. You have $10,000. And I'm like, hold on. There is, you don't owe anything. And there is, you are getting $10,000 back because we don't owe that much to DC. Yeah, no, don't do that as a down payment next year. Pay me that money, or at least the amount that I owe DC. And I will happily take that money. And then we still made money. Like, amazing. That's fantastic. That's not what you told me. And he's like, hold on. So, like, actually, that was like, for like 2-3 minutes, I'm on cloud 9 bopping around. Like, Ant, I got a refund too. I owe entity over here, but I'm getting more from over here. And we just got to reroute the money. No. He thought that we were doing something that we weren't, making payments along the way. Something we are going to do this year. Yeah, we don't have $10,000 coming back from Uncle Sam. So we're going to pay DC our money, and we took the very small amount that we overpaid Uncle Sam and put it as a down payment towards next year. Because,
So it's safe to say you were bamboozled.
Swindled.
You were run amok.
Bamboozled.
Good gracious.
Not good, bro.
That hurts.
Not freaking good. He only lives like a couple blocks from me, and he lives up a hill. I wanted to run up that hill. I don't ever want to walk up that hill. I want to run up that hill and be like, sir, we got problems. You and me, we got problems. Would you rather get a refund or like know that you got to keep your money all year?
I mean, so the refund that I got wasn't really that much. I think I just rather, if I'm going to have to pay something, I'd rather it be like small, like $100. I can do that. But I only got.
I had to pay the state of Maryland $7.
See, that's not bad. I mean, you're doing something right on your W-4s.
Yeah. Well, actually, no, it wasn't even me. It was Rachel, 'cause she coached like 2 solid core classes in the state of Maryland as a guest coach.
That's really good. Then.
And then you
All
gotta
our money.
they're like, hey, that whatever small amount of money you made for coaching those 2 classes, you owe us $7.
Not too shabby.
No. It's like, can you just let us? No? Okay.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I'm not upset that I got a small refund. I just think I'm just glad I didn't have to pay.
Yeah.
That's
Because like you don't actually want your refund to be too big.
You don't.
You want to kind of get it right. And then you will have kept your money throughout the year. Because like the chunk back is nice, but you could have just had that money all along in smaller payments and been earning interest because you invest your money because you're a wise person. I know that everyone listening is a wise person, Ant.
How?
Because they're listening to the show.
Duh.
I mean, obviously they have tremendous judgment, the most fantastic of taste, unimpeachable selections in all aspects of their life. And then some of them call, and I find out that's very much not true. It's the Hoffman Show. We're on the Team 980. We're always live as well on the free Odyssey app. Tell you what, let's take our first break a touch early and then go longer next, because I think the Commanders have made one of their most significant hires since Josh Harris took over. It proves a point that I have thought to be true, but have not had the chance to have a proof point quite like this. Tell you what it is and why next on the Hoffman Show on the Team 980 and always live on the free Odyssey app. It's the Hoffman Show. We're on the Team 980. We're always live as well on the free Odyssey app. We are streaming live on YouTube at the Team 980. Again, if you haven't subscribed, at Craig Hoffman, at the Team 980, do that. You get all of our show clips on demand if you can't listen to the entire thing. And, of course, at 980, we stream live all 3 hours. Also on demand, our podcast, the Hoffman Show podcast, available wherever you get yours. As is Take Command, I mentioned that, not to just continue the endless line of plugs to start this segment, but to tell you that Dane Brugler, the senior NFL draft analyst from The Athletic, was our guest on Take Command. And we'll play part 1 of our chat with Dane for you here on the radio. For, of course, the full interview, you got to check out me and Logan on Take Command. The Commanders made a hire today that is really, really big time and kind of sent shockwaves throughout the NFL. Now, it's not one that you're probably going to hear about a lot moving forward, but it is one worth mentioning for multiple reasons. Because, one, it shows the Commanders unequivocally are back. Back as a model, top-tier franchise in the NFL, back as a place that people want to be, back as a destination, back in every way but competing on the field for championships, which I realize is a pretty big but that one's going to take time. It also shows just how innovative and outside the box of a thinker that Josh Harris is, which is part of the reason why the Commanders are back. These two things are related. The hire is a guy named Dave Gardi, who was previously working in the NFL's front office. And his resume is really fascinating. And of course, he has a tie somehow to Dan Quinn. And of course, that tie was pointed out by our guy, Teresh Manuel, who, amidst his vacation in Portugal, Resh hopped on Twitter and said, hey, just so everyone knows, Dan Quinn was on Dave Gardi's dad's staff at Hofstra back in the day. So they go back a long, long way. But Gardi was the son of a coach. His dad was the head coach at Hofstra, a once proud football program that no longer exists. Hofstra, a university on Long Island. Their most famous football alumnus is probably Wayne Corbett, the old Jets wide receiver. But they would put out NFL guys every couple of years. I knew of Hofstra because it wasn't that far from my grandparents on Long Island in New York. But Hofstra coach, son grows up playing ball, ultimately winds up at Brown. Yeah, Brown, the Ivy League school. Plays quarterback at Brown for 4 years before being like, okay, not an NFL player. I'll go to law school. Gets his law school or his law degree actually from Hofstra, and then ultimately winds up working in the NFL league office for 21 years, starting on the law side doing labor relations. And so he's very intimately familiar with the salary cap, and then into football operations, where he is described in his bio on the NFL's website as the quote-unquote gatekeeper of the NFL's rules. This is someone who is incredibly well respected in league circles. You see like Peter Schrager from Fox Sports and NFL Network's Good Morning Football being like, wow, this is a big freaking hire. Adam Schefter, ESPN, big hire. Jim Nagy, the senior director of the Senior Bowl, saying the NFL office lost a good one. This is an incredible hire by the Commanders. And so what you see is a guy that clearly other teams would have shown interest in the past, choosing, much like Adam Peters did, to turn down other offers, to turn down staying where he was in an excellent, excellent job where he's very well compensated and gets to do a lot of the things that he likes, to go work for Josh Harris. He is going to be the senior vice president of football initiatives, where he'll work with the front office and the coaching staff. So we will have some level of input on football and some level of input in the front office. And to me, this is the kind of title that you make up to say, we are going to get this very smart person in our building. We're not exactly sure how we're going to use him yet, outside of a couple of key roles, which I will point out in a second. And we're going to make him available to anyone that touches football, and maybe he'll wind up on some special projects. Maybe he'll wind up just being a voice in the room as certain decisions are made. But this is someone who knows the game inside and out, that is incredibly smart, has never had a role quite like this, can bring innovative thinking into our rooms, and we trust the leadership to use him well. And this is why leadership matters, right? Again, as I've talked about quite a number of times on a much more traditional example, I love what Washington did on the offensive side of the ball with their staff, as long as it doesn't turn into what it was in Carolina. Carolina last year lacked the leadership ability to take a bunch of really smart people and have them cohesively work together. If Cliff Kingsbury and Dan Quinn, with whatever assists they need from people even higher up the chain, can get Anthony Lynn and Cliff and Brian Johnson and Bobby Johnson and all these other guys they bring in, Bobby Ingram, the receivers coach, all coming from different backgrounds on the same page, working within some concrete set of philosophies or philosophy to maximize all their skills, you've got a bunch of innovative and cool and creative solutions that meld a bunch of different offenses together into something cohesive that could be one of the best in the league. If you get the talent right, certainly to execute it, but schematically, even without the talent, on paper, you got a chance, man. But if not, and you just have a bunch of people throwing ideas at the wall and it's not cohesive and it's not brought together in a way that is taught to the players effectively, and it doesn't match and marry, so where, you kind of got one thing happening over here, another over there, they don't mesh together, it's easy to defend, it's complicated for your guys and simple for the defense to figure out, well, then you're in a bad way. In the same way that it could be that, or that leadership is going to make that into a cohesive thing that works or doesn't, I think it is up to Dan and Adam, as the two leaders of the departments that Dave Gardi will work for, to make him work, to make him worth whatever probably very large number of dollars that Josh Harris is going to be paying him. What is it that is your highest and best use? Let's put you there. Let's get you involved in decisions that you can help with, and that is smart business, right? So what does some of that stuff look like? Well, one thing that Dave Gardi is going to be doing is he's going to help with in-game strategy. And to me, what that reads at is you are going to have Dave Gardi upstairs in the booth with a headset and a monitor, and he could be in charge of like timeout stuff. You might be someone who works underneath him that's like a game strategy person that is more analytics driven, that is exactly like, yo, 2-minute drill, Dan, you're calling timeout here. Or not. But the big one is replays. And what I would tell you is, if I could pick anyone on the entire planet to do replays, I would search the internet for someone who was called the gatekeeper of the rules. That person is Dave Gardi. That's who the Commanders just hired. He's literally the best person to do this on the planet for that one thing that, by the way, can win or lose you games. So forget every other big picture thing that I just threw at you in terms of this guy could be helpful with player selection. This guy could be helpful with cap management. This guy could be helpful with rules in terms of technique and how coaches are coaching certain things to make sure that the Commanders don't get penalized on a frequent basis. If you literally just hired the guy to be your replay guy, that would be a great hire. I probably wouldn't give him this much position or this much power and position. I probably wouldn't pay him that much money, but that is a very important job, and they hired literally the best guy on the planet, in theory, to do it. That seems like money well spent. And to draw a contrast of who is doing that now, the literal best person on the planet versus, I'm not going to say the worst, you could go find a random person in the middle of any other continent that's not North America, and really any other country that's not America, and frankly, most parts of America that don't know anything or doesn't know anything about American football. And that person would be worse than Bruce Allen at that job. But amongst people who've worked in the NFL over the last 40 years, I don't know how many are worse than that at that job than Bruce Allen. And that's who did that job before. Bruce Allen. This always was like a twice a year thing where Jay Gruden would challenge something. And people would be like, well, isn't there supposed to be someone in the booth that can help him? And all of us reporters would be like, there is. It's Bruce. And the entire fan base would go, huh? What? Yeah. It was Bruce. And so now you've gone from old Goose Allen to whoever was doing it for Ron Rivera to the literal best guy on the planet. You want proof that Washington is a different place? When I see comments about this draft and it's like, well, the history of the organization says that, the history of the organization doesn't matter anymore. This might as well be a different organization. The only thing that's the same is the colors. It is the burgundy. It is the gold. It is you, the fans. It is currently still FedEx Field. It's not even FedEx Field anymore. It's Commanders Field. It's not even FedEx Field anymore. Nothing is the same. And that's not to say they're going to nail the draft pick or draft picks, but oh my God, it's different. And there's perhaps nothing more indicative of that it used to be Bruce Allen doing that, and now it's Dave Gardi. But I think, again, on the bigger point, this shows just how powerful Josh Harris is as an owner. Not as in, like, I am flexing my power. Power as in people want to come work for him. Burgundy Blog put out a really good list, which I had up. Where did it go? Of course, I clicked off it. But he listed off some of the people that have come to work for Harris in different roles this year. Here we go. Eugene Shen, analytics. You had Bob Myers and Rick Spielman in the search. You have a new director of performance and a new director of rehab, positions that never existed in Washington before. And surely there are other NFL teams that have some of these roles. But this is a guy who is looking not just at the NFL, but at the NBA, at Premier League soccer, which is typically on the cutting edge of everything because the money over there is insane. The NHL, because he's involved in all these leagues, he can take best practices from all of them and put them into all of his teams. And what he is doing in revamping the Commanders is making them a leading organization. And all that's going to do is continue to attract better and better people. Dave Gardi is just the latest. Very, very, very good hire, in my opinion, that is hugely, hugely significant in establishing that the Commanders are a place, unlike most other NFL franchises, that can do things that others can't. And it's part the prestige, which is part, by the way, you, the fans, continuing to show up and show out and make this place somewhere that people look at as a diamond in the rough, as, full of potential, all of those things. But it is Josh Harris, Adam Peters, Dan Quinn, and the power of people, the power of getting good people that people like to work with, that want to work with, and getting them together and then saying, hey, who wants to come with us? And the caliber of person you're going to get when you ask that question is so extraordinarily high, and we see it yet again today. When we get back, that's nice and all, but they still got to get quarterback right in this draft. Dane Brugler joins us. We actually talked about everything but quarterback with Dane because Brugler has talked about quarterback on every platform that he's been on. Obviously, his writing, his podcast work with The Athletic. So what are some of the other key positions that the Commanders are looking at look like in this upcoming NFL draft? Senior NFL draft analyst for The Athletic, Dane Brugler from Take Command, next here on The Hoffman Show. the Hoffman Show. We are on the Team 980. We're always live as well on the free Odyssey app and, of course, streaming live on YouTube at the Team 980. Coming up at 5 o'clock, Mark Ross, former Giants executive, two-time Super Bowl champion, joins us to talk NFL draft right now. A little bit of Take Command for you on a Monday. Part one of Logan and I's chat with senior NFL draft analyst from The Athletic, Dane Brugler. Our guest today is The Athletic's senior NFL draft analyst, but the better introduction is he's the author of The Beast. 324-page draft guide available now on The Athletic. It is so good. You get to dive into the prospect stories, and you got all the measurables, and you have literally any piece of information that you could want in print. It's Dane Brugler. Dane, thanks so much for doing this, man. What a week it is for you, and we appreciate some of your time during it.
No, I appreciate you having me on. It's been a fun week to share it with everybody. You know, it's 18 months in the making, working on this thing, and so to finally be able to present it to the world, and the feedback's been awesome. You know, there's something in here for everybody. If you're a diehard draft fan, if you're just a casual draft fan, there's something in here that will be of interest. Everything from the stats, the metrics, to the background information. A lot of people love to dive into that. That's my favorite part, just to learn where these guys are headed. You have to know where they're from and what adversities they've had to face over the years. What sports did they play growing up? What kind of recruit were they? All these different things factor in. Then, of course, the analysis. There's NFL verified testing information for almost 2,000 players in there. So take a lot of pride in this being something you can't get anywhere else. This is, if you want to know more about the draft, this is the one thing that you need to have on draft weekend.
No doubt. And we've spent so much time on the earlier rounds, and you're the guy that we can go to and be like, all right, let's talk about a little bit deeper prospects because you've done all this. But I have to ask real quick. You said it's 18 months in the making, which is over a year, which means I would like to ask you, how far into 2025's The Beast are you already?
Well, and honestly, it's not on purpose. It's just inadvertently, you can't help but pick up information for next year, whether maybe you're talking to a coach and you're talking about a player, and then someone else pops up, and all of a sudden, okay, I'm jotting down notes for this guy, or you're watching tape and you're watching a certain player, but hey, who's this number 12? I need to, play 36 on this tape. I need to make sure I go back and watch it. So inadvertently, I always end up picking up a lot of notes and different things on players for next year, which is really helpful. Get you a little bit of a head start. But I try to take a step back in May, and then June 1st is when I really dive right back in, get that base for the upcoming season, the players to know, all these things, start building that database. So yeah, it really is a long process that, and I maximize every day that I can, because it really takes that long to get this all done in time for the draft.
What's your favorite element of The Beast? There's so many different cool little nuances. Obviously, the players, the profiles. Is it the advanced metrics? Is it what is the thing that you're like, man, I'm really proud that this is in there, and this is something that we really had to work hard to get going?
Well, yeah, I the NFL verified testing information is huge. The combine.
Is that from the
stuff
GPS?
Oh, well, there is some of that in there, but okay. I think the combine stuff is public. A lot of people can get that, but all the pro day information, good luck trying to find the 10-yard splits from Washington's pro day, and that's not a really public information, but if you want to know that, it's all in here. And so, like I said, almost 2,000 players, their NFL verified testing information is in there. So if you want to know arm length, it's in there. If you want to know the exact height and weight, instead of just going by the school and the guy being 2 inches taller and 20 pounds heavier, I'll tell you what it really is in the guide. So that would be number one, just because this is the only place you're going to find that information. But then also the background information. It's fun to learn about these players, and it's fun to give them, not only them but their families a little bit of love too, because it's a group effort with a lot of these guys. Growing up, and parents having to really dedicate their lives to the training and all the sports that they and so to shine just a little light on the families and the process, what it's taken to get to the doorstep of the NFL, and learn about these guys as people more so than just the players. There's a lot of joy in doing that for me. So learning the backstories of each one of these players is a lot of fun and something that I definitely, again, to find out where they're headed, to find out where they've been and what they've had to do to get to this point. And that's a lot of fun for me to share those stories.
Yeah, that's really cool. And I mean, it's really fantastic. One of the things that makes the Beast such a great source material. But the thing that gets me is like, how do you get all the pro day information? Like, as you said, there's like 2,000 guys in there. Are you talking NFL teams? Do you send people out? Are you out there with a stopwatch and writing numbers down? Like, because I've tried to get it and it's really hard to get. Right. So how do you do it?
Yeah, it's all from teams. It's all from teams. It's as much as I would love to attend pro days myself, I just don't have the time, because the month of March doesn't happen for me. It's 18-hour days of just trying to get this thing done and, getting the pro day information from teams, the sources that I trust that I've built over the years. It's a key part of this because again, a lot of guys don't work out at the combine, or they do work at the combine, but maybe it's not the numbers they want, so they retest at the pro day. And so just comparing the two, and the guys that weren't invited, every year there's about 35 players that are drafted that were not invited to the combine. So making sure we're trying to find out who those guys are, and a lot of times it's based on the testing. If you want to learn, a lot of the 30 visits that teams have, a lot of times those are non-combine guys, because you have to get the medical information. And with the combine guys, you got that at the combine. With the non-combine guys, you have to bring them in on a 30 visit to make sure you get the medicals right, or it's hard to draft that player. So, that's where the pro day information is really important, because that's how a lot of teams base who they're going to be talking to based off of the testers. That's what a lot of the late risers that we hear about in the draft process, guys that get drafted fifth round, sixth round, seventh round, the guys that ran a 4.3 at the pro day that nobody, was much about. So yeah, the pro day information is definitely a source of pride for me.
All right, so that's a little background on the Beast. Let's dive into the prospects themselves. And I will say this on the front end. I think we're going to skip the quarterback conversation at 2, because, Dane, you, me, and Logan have talked about that ad nauseum, nonstop for months. So, obviously, listeners to this podcast know what Logan and I think. If you want more from Dane on the quarterback stuff, you can obviously read his reports in the Beast, but also hear him talk about it on the Athletic Football Show with our pals Robert Mays and Nate Tice. So, that leads to 36-40 next for the Commanders in the second round. And I think our big question right now that we're kind of pondering, that certainly Adam Peters and his crew are pondering, is, do you stay or do you move back into the back end of the first round? Theoretically, probably for an offensive tackle, maybe for an edge. If you're considering those situations, where's the drop off for you at those two positions, where if I tell you can get up to the early 20s, late teens, where it's worth it for you to do that for which players that you think will be available?
Yeah, and the tackles, we're going to see those guys fly off the board. We'll see 5 or 6 go in the top 25. And so it depends on what the grades are for the Commanders. Do they believe a guy like Tyler Guyton from Oklahoma is a plug-and-play tackle and someone they can trust to be the guy for them? Some teams are encouraged. Some teams are optimistic. Other teams, they're not. They see a project, a guy that's going to take time. Yeah, the ability is great, but it's going to take some time. And so if you're the Commanders, is that someone you're willing to trade up for? Kingsley Suamataia from BYU, he's been a popular guy with 30 visits as teams try to figure him out. He's a young player. He just turned 21 years old, third-year sophomore, has a lot of ability. He's a former 5-star player, but he was at Oregon. Then he had to transfer to BYU because he had a tough time being away from family. So and that was just 2 years ago. So, okay, is he going to be okay going to DC and being away from family and, being in an NFL locker room? Like, is he suited for that? So teams are trying to figure out that part of it, just the mental makeup and the aspect of being a professional. Is he ready for that stage? And do we feel like he's worthy trading up for? So the tackles, I do think there's a drop off after maybe the top 5, and then that's where you come with the question marks with Tyler Guyton, with Asua Matia. But at the same time, these guys aren't going to last. These offensive tackles, they might not last you in the second round. They might not even be there. So because not every team, but most teams need tackle depth. And so it's a position that is top heavy this year. I think there is a pretty sizable drop off once you get to day 2. So I can understand if the Commanders look at this and say, yeah, we could maybe just draft Patrick Paul in the second round. The tackle from Houston, who obviously has brothers on the team. There's a connection there. But if we really want to maximize the player we're going after at tackle at this spot, we need to trade up. So they need to look at their options here and see if one of these tackles were to fall, and then see what it would cost, because it might be worth it in their situation.
So you mentioned you have a top 5. Would you mind giving us your top 5 offensive tackles? And then, how do you stack those top 5, compared to the Roger Rosengartners, the Patrick Pauls, the, Amadijis from Yale? Where do they fit? Blake Fisher from Notre Dame. Some of those guys are pretty good football players, but I think the Commanders are looking for something very specific at left tackle, which I think is one of the reasons why you probably want to move up. But I just wanted to kind of get your thoughts on the dichotomy and the relationship between those two groups or tiers of players.
Yeah, for me, Joe Alt from Notre Dame, the top player this year, I think he'll be off the board somewhere in the top 7 picks. Olu Fashanu from Penn State, local kid for you guys in D.C. He's right there in that mix to be a top 12 pick. J.C. Latham from Alabama, maybe the strongest player in the draft. He's my 3rd tackle. Talise Fuaga from Oregon State, he's my 4th tackle. Some teams have him at guard. There's some split opinions on him, but he's just a really solid player. Amarius Mims from Georgia is my 5th tackle, and wouldn't be surprised 3 years from now he's the best player, best tackle out of this group. He has so much ability, 6'7", 3/4, 340 pounds, just scratching the surface of what he can be. 8 starts to his name. So there's the body of work's not there, but if you're going to bet on traits and bet on ability, you're going to like Amarius Mims. He's just a rare dude. And then that's where we get to Tyler Guyton and Kingsley Suamataia, Patrick Paul, and then we get to that year, which I think is a Roger Rosengarten. I've heard the late first round love, maybe early second round with Roger Rosengarten. It's a little rich for me. I get it. And Rosengarten, he was a player that went to Washington as a left tackle, and then when Michael Penix transferred to Washington, they talked to him about, hey, let's shift you over to right tackle. Want to protect me because Michael Penix is a lefty. We want to protect his blind side. So let's move you to right tackle. And, he had a really good last 2 years as a starter, started every game, 28 games. There were some bumps in the road. He is a light player. When he plays with high pads, that's where things kind of fall apart for him. But he is a good athlete. He moves well. It's just a matter of consistency with him, with the mechanics, with the body posture. And I think he's going to get there. He's a younger player. Blake Fisher, another young player, literally just turned 21 years old a couple weeks ago. But good size, 6'5" 3/4, 310 pounds. You like the ability that he has. It's just, okay, he's inexperienced, and he did start at right tackle each of the last 2 years, but there are times where there are certain games. It was the Louisville game, you watch that tape and they had to take him off the field because it was just so up and down, you couldn't trust him out there. So he's a young player, and if you throw him out there from week 1, you're going to have to live with the ups and downs, with the hiccups. And so obviously if you're drafting a tackle on day 2, you're sacrificing something, right? And a lot of times with offensive tackles, you're sacrificing experience, and it's going to take a little bit longer with those guys that maybe they're not as finished products when you're talking about a Rosengarten or Blake Fisher. It's something where tackles usually get overdrafted because that's just supply and demand. You have to do that. And wouldn't be surprised at all if we see that more and more of that this year, because again, it's a top-heavy position this year.
All right, that is from our chat with Dane Brugler, of course, the senior NFL draft analyst for The Athletic. If you want the full conversation, you can check it out on the Take Command feed. Also, can let you know later in the week, much more coming on the offensive line class in this draft. Logan and I talked today with Gojo, Mike Golick Jr., It was an awesome conversation. We got real football nerdy. But it was really important because the Commanders are asking really important questions about this offensive line group, and they're trying to find a very specific thing either in the second round or do they trade back up into the first. And the more we talk through it, the less I actually like that idea, which is crazy because I was one of the first people I felt like who was to me like, hey, you should talk about this. And the fan base was like, yeah, no, I'm all in on this. And then now that I look at the class, I'm still undecided a week out. I mean, I'm not undecided. I think it's less likely that it's going to work out in the way the Commanders want. Anyway, we talk about that next. We can also talk about it later in the week with Mike Golick Jr. So we'll let you hear some of that later in the week. And, of course, make sure you're subscribed to Take Command to not miss a second. When we get back, maybe I'll expand on that thought for a second. But then also, it is Marathon Monday, the Boston Marathon this morning, which always leads to fun conversations of how fast could Anthony or how long could Anthony and I go at the winner's paces. We'll check in on our fitness next. the Hoffman Show. We're on the Team 980. We're always live as well on the free Odyssey app and streaming live on YouTube at the Team 980. Mark Ross, NFL Network insider, going to join us coming up in just a few minutes. But first, I guess I should probably expand on I made an interesting football point that I feel like we should expand on real quick. And maybe we'll circle back to this tomorrow during Vibe Check Tuesday. I actually think this is going to be the question that we ask tomorrow. And we've talked about trading up for the Commanders. And it's one thing if like Amarius Mims falls to 23, 24, especially if he somehow gets beyond that. Tyler Guyton's, I think, another one that you have to consider. But the rest of that O-line class, I think, is either going to go early or is not worth trading up for. And I just think that the swing is going to have to be too big. Like, and then a question becomes like, okay, well, if you're relying on them getting to like 24, 25, would you then do a better package for like 18, 19, somewhere in there, if you could get Mims or Guyton or whoever, Fashanu, the tackle out of Penn State, but you have to give up 36 and 40 or like 36 in your second next year. I'm just out on that. Like, I think that price is way too steep for me to move up that much for any of the tackles in this draft. I would rather just take a flyer on someone in the second round and be able to get another player. Like, sure, if somehow Joe Alt fell is the best tackle, but he's not making it out of the top 10. But I think that the price you're going to pay to move up and use that pick on the kind of player that you're going to be able to get, it's worth having two players for. Like, I just don't think the math is going to wind up mathing in their favor.
Yeah, I mean, I would agree. Again, like Dane said, there are 5 probably in like the same tier caliber player. So if it isn't one of them, I would agree. I'm not really, looking to give up that much for a second tier guy. But if it is one of those guys and we're able to, get a stalwart of a left tackle, I think it's definitely worth it. And just like looking at, the Commanders' history of just like left tackles, like we've had some really good left tackles.
It's one of the few things that they've actually got a good history on.
Exactly. So I think if one of those guys is there and we can do it, we can shore up the left side of the line, and our rookie quarterback's blind side for the next 5-10 years, I definitely think it's worth the price. But again, if it isn't one of those top 5, top 4 guys, don't do it necessarily.
Yeah, I think.
Well, for an offensive lineman anyway, because I think defensively, if Chop Robinson or one of those other guys are,
I'm not taking them in the teens because we're talking about like would you move up? It's one thing to go into the 20s, right, where you give up say 36 and 67.
Yeah, that's fair.
I'm good with that for the right guy. Giving up 36 and 40 to get into the high teens, that's too rich for me.
That was my bad.
For anybody. Basically, like, again, if Alt falls, but even like Logan's, one of his favorite linemen in this draft is Talisi Fuaga, right? The tackle out of Oregon State. Mm-hmm. Except for he might be a guard. And he played on the right side. So, like, even if he falls, are you willing to give up 36 and 40 for a guy who might be best as a right guard? Like,
no.
Absolutely not. And so that's the kind of thing that I think you run into with this particular class is there are good football players. Grant Barton from Duke, like he might wind up being a tackle, but he's probably a center. I'm not trading up for that. And so, again, not to be dismissive of the player, Grant Barton's going to be a really good NFL player. But is he going to be worth 2 potentially good NFL players? Probably not. Mark Ross coming up in just a few minutes. First, though, quickly, Marathon Monday. We do this every year, Ant. Helen Obiri of Kenya broke away late. It was a really fun race to watch. Emma Bates from the U.S. was out in front for a lot of it, and you just were like, is she? And then they hit the Newton Hills and did not go as well for I mean, she was still the top American and ran an incredible race. But Helen Obiri of Kenya able to break away. The Kenyans and the Ethiopians dominating the top 10 on both the men's and the women's side. But 22:37 was Helen Obiri's time. And then on the men's side, it was, where did he go? Cisse Lemma won the men's side. By the way, incredible story. 2 DNFs in Boston previously, and then a 30th place finish last year. This year, 2:06:17, 10th fastest time in Boston history. So, Ant, gonna pull up the old marathon pace chart. For Helen O'Beary, that is an average of, oh, come on, be faster, pace chart. Let's see, we're scrolling. Lemma's time isn't even on this pace chart. We're talking about for a 22:30, somewhere in the 5:25 per mile range. And how long could you run at that pace?
5 miles per hour?
No. 5-minute miles.
Oh, 5 minutes.
So that is, we're talking about 11.1-ish miles an hour.
So my fastest mile ever is a 5:31 or is a 5:29, one of them. So I would say maybe 3/4 of a mile, if that. That is fast, Craig.
Yeah, and they did it for 26. Yeah, 5:25 over 26.2. And by the way, this course is so hard. They did that over one of the hardest marathon courses in the world.
That is insane.
Yeah. I don't know if I could go a half mile. Like, and I've been doing distance running, and I'm like getting faster at a respectable rate. I don't know that I'm trying to think. 5:25 by 2 is a 2:12 half mile.
Mm-hmm.
I would have to like book it and pass out at the finish line to get that.
Yeah, that's an 800 right there. Then.
Yeah, it's a 2:12 800. I don't know that I could hit that.
I think you could.
Do I have to live after?
Breathe a little bit, yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Just checking in. Maybe next year though, I'll feel better about that 800. Maybe I could be with you at 3/4 of a mile next year.
Yeah, I definitely think I can do the 3/4. Because my 800 time was like 150 something.
That's damn good. That's very impressive and very fast. Mark,
for short periods of time, like you would kill me in like if we did like 2-3 miles. Like you're gonna pass me.
I don't know about
like
2-3. Once we get to like 5 or 6, I think I got you though.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Anyway, Ant, very fast. Mark Ross, very smart. He's an Ivy League guy. Then he went and won a couple Super Bowls as a front office executive for the Giants, and now he works for NFL Network, and he's going to join us next, talk NFL Draft here on the Hoffman Show. Hoffman Show, hour number 2 here on the Team 980, always live as well on the free Odyssey app, and of course, streaming live on YouTube at the Team 980. We will do a post-mortem on the Wizards season coming up at 5:30. Right now, though, it is time for Not My Beat.
Today's top story from the perspective of someone who's there.
You are looking live.
This just in, Not My Beat.
Our guest today is a 2-time Super Bowl champion as an executive for the New York Giants. Spent a long time as a scout, director of college scouting, amongst other positions in the NFL. It's Mark Ross from the NFL Network, who's a part of their ongoing Path to the Draft coverage, leading us up to the NFL Draft first round on April 25th. Mark, thanks so much for your time, man. Welcome to the show.
Sure thing. My pleasure.
So I feel like I could go off script here, and we could talk about some of the other positions in this draft, and we'll get there. But this is Washington. We know where all eyes are. It is on that Thursday night, number 2 overall selection. So I will just ask very simply, if you are on the clock for Washington, Caleb Williams has gone off the board to the Chicago Bears. Who is your selection if you get to make the call at number 2 for the Commanders?
Running up to put that Jaden Daniels pick in there for sure. And I've been telling people this throughout the whole draft season that I think the gap between Caleb and Jaden is much closer than it is between Daniels and whoever the third person is. So I really love the guy. I love the production. I love the playmaking. I love the starts, the time he's played, the personality, the work habits, just his whole package. I just really love him, and I think he's been a star, won the Heisman, so he'll be able to take the full beating there of the DMV fan base there and be able to handle that. But I expected him to have some success, and I just love the guy.
So it does seem like there is, I don't want to say like a total split, because it's not unanimous, not consensus amongst former folks who actually worked or played in the league. And, I would say like media draft analysts, if you will, in terms of Jaden Daniels versus Drake May. But there does seem to be a lot more people in the league or formerly in the league that like Jaden versus some more like pure scouting and the media types who like Drake May. Why do you think that dichotomy is? And I guess more directly to posit this straight to you, like, what is it that you like so much about Jaden that puts him in that class closer to Caleb than Drake, where other people might favor other things?
Look, great quarterbacks in the league were really great quarterbacks their whole life. There's never that, well, he could be this, or he may develop into. Whenever you start maybeing and could being with particularly quarterbacks, but any player, then you got something wrong. You got to look at the tape, look at the film, and say, yep, this is our guy. He's the best player on the field. He's making big-time plays. He's raising the level of everybody else there. And that's what you want in a franchise quarterback and a quarterback that you think can get you to the Super Bowl. My second draft was with the Eagles in 1999, and we had a group of quarterbacks there: Tim Couch, Donovan McNabb, Dante Culpepper, Achilles Smith, Cade McNown. There was a bunch of guys, but in my eyes, as a young scout, I was an area scout. I was like, Donovan was the guy. Like you didn't have to guess. The guy did it his whole life. He produced. He was a big-time playmaker. He was from Chicago, so he could handle the whole situation in Philadelphia there with the media and the fans. So it wasn't could he do it? You saw him do it. And that's what I think with Jaden is that he's carried this burden. He's carried this weight of being a playmaker and handling it perfectly. So I'm always going to go with the better player. I think he's a better, number one, just a better player than Drake May. He can do things that Drake May cannot do. He can do everything Drake May can do and do things he cannot do. And there's no, well, he could be. Yes, he'll get better, but there's not the games and stretches of his, particularly this year, where you're like, where's Jaden Daniels? And there's just too much of that with Drake May, of a lot of bad games and a lot of bad film that you're just trying to guess and say, well, he could get better at this. His accuracy could get better, his poise, his pocket presence. And to me, that's when you make mistakes with quarterbacks.
Mark Ross, NFL Network analyst, is with us here on the Hoffman Show. I think you've hit on the reasons why, even though I've waffled throughout this, I've ultimately landed on Daniels. And I think one of the biggest things that I am impressed with, Mark, is the leap he made from 22 to 23. At first was kind of a question mark because you're like, did this guy just get old enough to figure out college football? And I think then you hear about the VR work he did and some of the time that he put in, and you go, oh, okay, that explains a lot. How can you explain to the audience kind of how not the film watching portion goes, but the scouting process where you watch the film and you have questions and then you talk to people and get answers, and how that process works from someone who's been in the positions that you've held in the league and how that applies to a guy like Daniels?
But you're just talking about his career progression and playing so well this year?
Well, the progression and then like kind of the information gathering that goes on that might explain certain things, such as you make this remarkable jump from 22 to 23 in his case.
Well, for him, this guy played a lot of football. He started as a freshman at Arizona State, and you could see the talent. I mean, he just had a bad infrastructure there, not a whole lot around him. So you could actually see it there, just a skinny kid running around making plays. And then, of course, the COVID year, and then he exploded this year. And I think Joe Burrow is a good sort of measuring stick for him to say, yes, this can happen. You can be sort of a one-year superstar and at the same exact school, transfer, almost the same exact story. But what happens is when you evaluate, your area scouts they're grinding from August, training camp, just going to all these schools. So the Commanders have had their bevy of scouts that have been at Baton Rouge throughout the season, and then you get into the postseason with the combine and the meetings with Jaden and with your coaches and coordinator, and you talk to as many people as possible at LSU, at Arizona State, at his high school, and you're just trying to get a feel for the totality of Jaden Daniels on the field, in the classroom, in the film room, in the weight room, how he treats the equipment staff, the trainers. You're just gathering as much information as possible. And when you get the convergent validity on him and when everybody around him saying sort of the same things about his progression and his maturity and his growth, then you're saying, okay, we have a winner here. Now, if there's a bunch of different opinions and back and forth, then it's like, wait a minute, who is this guy? But with Jaden, it's sort of everything's the same, everything's positive, everything's led to him having this evolution as a player and a person. So really, it's just about, number one, your area scouts set the tone as far as digging into the information, and then it expands there from your organization all the way up to your ownership group these final few weeks.
Yeah, that's such a good insight. Again, Mark Ross is our guest. He's been there. He's done that. Been a director of college scouting. He's part of the Giants front office that won 2 Super Bowls with us here on the Hoffman Show. So the other big question for Washington, Mark, once you get past quarterback at 2, is do you wind up trading back into the first round, possibly for an edge, but more likely for your left tackle of the future? They have those 2 picks at 36 and 40. And then they obviously have 67 and 78 as well, and 100 in the 3rd round. Like, if they put a package of some of those picks together, how high up could they get? And are there linemen that you think could fall into the 20s that could be worth it?
Well, I think that with, number one, they're in an advantageous situation of having so many picks, and they have a ton of needs. So this is the year to have a lot of picks and a lot of needs. And I think there's this group of tackles that are pretty much going to be the same from maybe the mid-first round to the bottom of the 2nd round, where there's this whole group of guys that I don't think there's this one or two. Joe Alt, I think maybe is just the class and a couple interior guys. But overall, there's a lot of different tackles with different skill sets, different positives, different negatives, a lot of developmental guys, I don't think there's anyone that's going to just step in right away next year except for Alt and say, yep, we feel confident with him. So for the Commanders, we can sit there at 36. We can be there at 40 and still get good players and still get the value of someone that we may take at 15, because I don't think there's that huge of a difference from the 2nd tackle to the 10th tackle. There's that many guys and there's that much talent, and it's a good and bad, because I don't think there's that many surefire people that you're going the next year and say, go block Micah Parsons. You don't want that to happen. So they're in a good situation. I would use as many picks as possible for the Commanders, because I think they have a lot of needs that still need to be filled. So I would not sort of give that up because number one, the value and the need that they still have for a bunch of spots.
So we've talked to, obviously, you can imagine what our radio shows are like these days, talking to a million people about the same things from January until next Thursday. And we've certainly had a lot of people that I think agree on the not worth it to trade. You're the first guy I've heard, though, to say that there's not a big difference in, like, once you get past alt. So for you, the tier is kind of alt, and then it's the next group with Fashanu and all kind of the Fuagas who might be tackles, might be guards, the Graham Bartons of the world, all the way down to guys like Patrick Paul, Roger Rosengarten. Those guys are all kind of could be hit or miss guys for you?
Yeah, for sure. There's a lot of, and I got Fatanu as a guard. I think he's day one guard, Pro Bowl player. Jackson Powers Johnson. The interior guys, I think, are real ready to go. Than the tackle. So if you want to consider Fatanu a tackle, then yeah, he's ready to go. But I think he might have some growing pains at tackle. But as a guard, could be a Pro Bowl guard. Yes, as far as and even Graham Barton's an inside guy. I don't see him as a tackle. You're going to be in trouble if he's a tackle. So when you're just looking at Jordan Morgan and J.C. Latham, and you mentioned Fashawn, these guys have a lot of development still. They have a lot of holes. They aren't just I don't feel confident in their skill set and development right now that they'd be day one starters or year one starters, and you feel confident that they would get out there and produce at a high level. There'll be a lot of growing pains, and will they be better? If you take any of them, will they be better than what you have on the roster now and say, they could start, or do you want a veteran in there just to say, okay, you can get us through, and you won't get beat down mentally if you get beat so much. So, yeah, I think there's a big group of tackles that will be at the disposal of the Commanders even into the second round.
So that kind of hits, Mark, on something that I'm curious how much you thought about as a front office executive and how much you think about now as an analyst, which is the idea of getting it right versus making it right. Because I think quarterback is a great example of this between Washington and New England. I actually feel confident that if the infrastructure that Washington has in place and how they're running their franchise, that if they draft Jaden, Drake, or J.J. McCarthy, they could make any of those guys right. And that with where New England is at right now, I look at that situation and I go, oh, buddy, whoever goes there is going to struggle because they just don't have the infrastructure set up for anybody to succeed. How much of that did you guys think about in the front offices you worked in versus, obviously you're trying to select the best player for you, but maybe you watch a guy go somewhere else and you go, I don't know if that's going to work there. And the idea of making it right with what you do and how you run your organization versus quote unquote getting it right, like all these players' success is preordained no matter where they go.
Well, I think there are certain players, certain quarterbacks that would be good no matter. Andrew Luck, you could have dropped him in any situation and he was going to be a star. But I think the infrastructure and the foundation doesn't make a quarterback great. It just takes away the burden of having to be great all the time. So when you have that, some of these guys are going to bust. We're talking about all these guys, and they're going to be busts. There's going to be maybe one or two that are really good. There's going to be maybe an average guy, and there's going to be a couple busts. So I know every draft season we go in, and all 5 or 6 quarterbacks are all going to be Pro Bowlers, and that's just not the case. But rinse and repeat. We do it every draft season. So there's reasons why some guys just aren't good enough, even with a good foundation, and they're just not built for the NFL, don't have the skill set. So do the Commanders have a better situation than the Patriots? Sure. But you mentioned those 3 guys, let's just say May, Daniels, and JJ, but that doesn't necessarily mean all 3 are going to be successful if they're in Washington. I think there's going to be levels of talent. They're different talents individually. They have, different makeup mentally. So I think, yes, the situation can help them, but at the essence, stars are going to be stars. Average guys are going to be average, and busts are going to be busts. The situation just sort of accelerates what they're going to be if it's a good situation.
Interesting. Mark Ross with us for another minute or two here on the Hoffman Show. So that 36th and 40th pick, Mark, obviously offensive tackle is probably going to be the prime position that Washington is attacking. I think edge and wide receiver and corner are the other ones. We can run quickly through all 3 of those. Is there kind of a second-tier edge player that you like for Washington that you think would be a good fit in what we know as a Dan Quinn defense, even if we know they're going to change it with Joe Witt and company a little bit here in D.C.?
Yeah, they just got to get good players. They just can't force and say we need, because you mentioned how many positions for, and we can go through
Right.
a few more that they need. They need a couple quarters. They need O-line. They need another receiver. Wouldn't be too bad either. With help Terry out. I know they got Dotson, but he's okay and made the signing. But you can't trot Cleveland Farrell out there as your starter. So there's a lot of needs and positions that they need. So I would think Adam Peters right now and Dan Quinn are not forcing and say, we have to take this here and we have to take this there. They can really truly be, let's take the best value. Let's position these players on the draft board of, okay, these are our specific needs, but these are the best players. And we have so many picks that we can really rebuild on the fly like that. So, that being said, guys like Marshawn Nealon from Western Michigan, Braylon Trice from Washington, those are interesting, intriguing guys there at the top of the second that I would think would be in the mix for the Commanders.
And then at wide receiver, everyone's got the top three, or I shouldn't say everyone. There are certain people that have, Brian Thomas Jr. or whoever else, higher on Odunze, lower on Harrison, whatever. But outside of the mostly consensus top three guys, how deep is your next tier of wide receivers?
Well, I think this is the receiver group. I think is very similar to the tackle group, where there's a lot of players and there's a deep group that you could get into the second round. And it mentioned A.D. Mitchell from Texas, and my favorite player is Xavier Legette from South Carolina.
Mm-hmm.
I think he is going to be a star, and I don't understand why he's not being talked about with that group of guys you just talked about. And big, fast, powerful, a grown man. He is a grown man, and someone like a Jermaine Burton from Alabama, who is extremely skilled and explosive. So Xavier Worthy, who ran the fastest 40 ever, he has this particular skill set that you have to work around. But there are a lot of intriguing players there. Ladd McConkey in the mix. So a lot of intriguing players and receivers into the second and the third round. And as the Puka Nacua showed last year, you can go deep and find a star if you're looking for the right player.
Who's the player you like in this draft way more than everyone else? Is it Legette?
Xavier. I just mentioned Legette. I mean, whenever we have shows and we talk about the underrated guy, he's the one. He's the one for me.
And last but not least, then the inverse of that. Who's the guy that everyone likes that you're like, I don't see it. It's not for me.
Oh, easy. Brock Bowers. Bowers is,
okay.
He's there's this guy every year, and I learned that when I started out as a scout. You always stick with your convictions. Doesn't matter if the whole room and the whole world is going against what you think. Stick with your convictions, and it's just I don't see this special, unique talent. I think he has some limitations. I think Georgia does a wonderful job of scheming him open. He cannot block. He is not a good blocker. I don't care what anybody else says.
Nope.
He's not a good blocker.
Even the people that like him will tell you that's not why they like him.
Yeah. So, he's just not gifted to compensate for that. So he's my guy. We'll see what happens. I said prior to the draft season and the workout season that he would be disappointing in the workout, and he did not work out. So I think he kind of knew that as well. So I got a little feather in my cap as of now, where I was talking to the colleagues saying, I told you he's hiding something. So we'll see how it all pans out with Brock Bowers.
For sure. One of the most interesting players in the first round, too, because depending on where he goes, that could start. Like some of the teams that will consider him also considering tackle. So when does that tackle run start? Going to be fun to watch. And, of course, for all of this coverage leading up to the draft, make sure you check out Mark Ross on NFL Total Access and Path to the Draft, weeknights on NFL Network. Mark, this was great. Really appreciate your perspective. Thanks so much for spending some time with us.
Sure thing. Anytime.
That is Mark Ross, NFL Network analyst, two-time Super Bowl champion, with us here on The Hoffman Show. And, again, live coverage of the NFL Network. Path to the Draft, 6 p.m. Eastern, and Total Access, 7 p.m. Eastern, Monday through Friday this week, with exclusive updates leading up to the NFL Draft, which does air on NFL Network. When we get back here on The Hoffman Show, the Wizards season is finally, mercifully, over. We will have our post-mortem. Anthony's got some key questions for me, and we'll take some calls on this Wizards season that never really got off the ground. Next, here on The Hoffman Show. chair very calmly. So the Washington Wizards season is over, which honestly, Ant, yay! Normally that's a boo. We want more basketball. I think for this season's Wizards, everyone has had enough. Denny Avia had a post that started with like a black and white photo, and you're like, yeah, that's the kind of season it was. Kyle Kuzma's on Twitter asking for brunch recommendations. He's going to be spending more time in D.C. this offseason. So he's like, I need to know where to go for brunch. So look for a very, very tall man at your local brunch spot. A couple of good recommendations. I did favorite that post because I'm like, where's everyone else going for brunch? I got to make sure I don't lose out on any recommendations. But we have burning questions, non-brunch affiliated, to answer in terms of the Wizards season. Where would you like to start, producer of this show?
I think we can start, simple. What would you say was your biggest takeaway from the season that was?
My biggest takeaway from the season that was for the Wizards is that they are farther away than I thought, which is saying something because I thought they were pretty far away. But I also thought that they would. I mean, look, I have to own it. One of the worst predictions I've ever said was that the Wizards would cruise past their over on the Vegas win total this year. I mean, Jordan Poole's numbers compared to what Bradley Beal's were the last couple of seasons were pretty comparable. And so I'm like, well, they'll at least win like 35. That's kind of what they've been. Obviously, Porzingis was a huge factor in their success last year. But Kuz and Poole, like guys like Kispert, Denny, taking steps, like they got enough to win 35 games. Like they're not going to be good, but they're not going to be terrible. And very quickly we find out that they were terrible. I still think it's weird because I actually don't know how bad they are, in part because their extraordinarily terrible stretch, a.k.a. the first 50 games of the season, between Wes Unseld and some confounding coaching stuff, and the biggest factor being Jordan Poole's incredibly lackluster play. Well, if Jordan is the guy that we saw the last month and a half of the season, like they're not as far as they looked in January. I'll put it that way. But clearly, I think the biggest takeaway for anybody coming out of the season has to be that they are simply farther away from, forget contention, from like playoff contention than we thought coming into the year.
Would you say like 2, maybe 3 years?
I mean, I think it depends on what they do this offseason, right? Okay. Like if all of a sudden Koulibaly makes the French team or doesn't, but has a productive summer, right? His goal is to make the French national team. He would then play in the Olympics at home in Paris, which would be awesome for him. It'd be a great experience. I think that French team can compete for a medal for sure. Obviously, you got Gobert, Wemby, like Bilal, like that's a pretty nasty team, as well as some others. Does Tony Parker be like, I think I have a little more basketball left in me. I would like a medal. They've got other guys though that are good and are going to help them compete with the U.S. and Spain and Argentina and some of the other powers in global basketball. But or he goes to summer league and hopefully he has one of those like, okay, you're going to play 3 games and dominate everybody and then shut it down because you're clearly better than all the rest of these dudes here. So you got that with Bilal. Denny continued to grow throughout the year, and by the end of it, like he's a bona fide NBA starter. Kuz talked today about he's got to come back in better shape, like he thought he was ready to go, and then you realize the burden night to night of being the guy comes with a even different level of conditioning than being in good NBA shape. And there were times this year where he got sloppy late in games, and that comes from fatigue. So his understanding of that, I think, is a great sign that he's going to come back better next year. And then the biggest factor is, like, what is Jordan Poole and what do they do around those guys? Like, do you wind up signing and trading Tyus Jones, or you try to run back a Jones-Poole backcourt that makes absolutely no sense, even if I like both players individually? So I think those, like, they could be in the playoffs next year. I don't think that they will, and I think that's a conscious choice to keep an eye on the long term and not try to shortcut it and sign some guys that could help them make the playoffs next year when they're not really a part of the long-term plan.
Nah, for sure. And you talked about Koulibaly and the growth that he's had this season. Who would you say, also took some steps in the right direction or are just like overall bright spots, following this season that we had?
So Koulibaly is undoubtedly the biggest bright spot, right? He was so much better than everyone thought he would be. People thought he was going to split the year between the G League and the regular Wizards because he had barely played top French level basketball. Like, this is a dude that, when we're talking in January and talking about how well he's doing, with the phrase a year ago he was in the French second division was a true statement. It wasn't until late in last season that he got up on the team that Wemby was on over in France in the first division. He was a second division French teenager who then was able to get as an 18-year-old onto that first division team, and then all of a sudden was in the NBA and playing like real NBA defense and attacking closeouts and making threes at a clip that nobody saw coming. So how advanced he is already is the biggest bright spot where you're like, oh, I wonder if they got one of their 3 stars, like maybe even the second. It feels unlikely he's the first, but crazier things have happened. The crazier thing that has happened is Giannis Antetokounmpo exists. But, like, are you talking about a Giannis-y type of trajectory here where all of a sudden we're looking up in 2 years being like, oh, my God, this guy's an all-star? I think it's not a realm of possibility, although I think he probably winds up just below it unless he hits another growth spurt. So Koulibaly is undoubtedly bright spot 1. As weird as this is to say, I think the other most significant bright spot in the season is Poole didn't tank until the end. We're going to talk about disappointment, so we'll save more on Poole for a second. But the fact that he didn't finish like he started and he had a 20-plus point, 8-plus assist month and a half to end the season, that's important. Other than that, Kispert, big positive year. Avdia, I think, had a really, really, really good year. And the other guy that I'll throw out, like, those guys were kind of did the thing that we hope they would do, like continue to grow into bigger roles. I don't think they're stars. Maybe they're starters. I think on a championship team, if they're your 6th and 7th guys, like, you're in amazing shape. But either one of them could be a spot starter or a regular starter with the right people around them. I think one of the best moves they made this year is getting Marvin Bagley. They played the first part of the year without a functional big man in the lineup in the ways that they needed. Gafford was good, but he was hurt a lot. And once Bagley got here, and the thing is, like, actually, I shouldn't even say that about Gaff. Gaff was actually really good for the time that he was here. He was probably the best player in the first 50 games of the season, not named Kyle Kuzma. But they had no depth. And so there was like 2 weeks where Bags and Gafford were here together, and they like had a respectable 2 weeks because they actually had proper big man depth. And then there was like 5 games, it felt like, where Bagley and Rashawn Holmes were healthy, and they like did okay in those games. So, you look at the roster construction and you go, okay, if Holmes is a good player, which he looks like he might be, and Bagley's a good player, which he might be, you're actually not as far up the creek as you thought. You just got to find a ways to send those guys home for the summer with a plan to get them through next year healthy, because they're potentially NBA starting caliber bigs or really good bench bigs. But then the question is obviously, like, what do you do around them? And that gets into the how far are you question.
Yeah, I definitely love the Marvin Bagley addition. Also, I like the kid Tristan Vukcevic when he did play.
Yeah.
I think he was definitely a bit of a bright spot to me because we finally got to see him play. We took him in the second round. And
he's a real NBA player.
In limited minutes.
If you get a real NBA player in the second round, you've won. Like, that is the nature of those. Like, sure, the real winning is getting Draymond Green, who's going to the Hall of Fame. Like, that's sick. Vukcevic is not going to go to the Hall of Fame. It does. I doubt. I mean, who knows? I'm not going to write the kid off because he played like 5 games this year. But he played, and he was good. Like, he can play in the NBA now. And now he's going to go to Summer League and, go through his offseason, like, understanding. Like, I'm really happy they got him that taste because now he knows what he's got to do. And if he can add some size and some bulk and, some skills or like polish the skills that he knows are going to make him really good, like, that's a potential future starter right there. So that was a hell of a pick who's paying off. So, like, I will say this. Dawkins and Winger come from that OKC thing or that OKC program where they just figure out how to draft the right dudes all the time. They're 2 draft picks. Like, say what you want about Poole, say what you want about, any other acquisition or trade or whatever they made. They got 2 draft picks so far as the head of the Wizards. One of them's Koulibaly, and the other's this Vukcevic kid. And I have that so far as a very significant 2 for 2.
Yeah.
And we'll see. I mean, another bright spot could be the draft lottery if they can win that. And then we'll see what they do with that pick. It's the Hoffman Show. We're on the Team 980. We're always live as well on the free Odyssey app. We'll take some calls on the Wizards next. Plus, that was a very positive Wizards segment. It's just kind of how our questions fell. We saved a little extra time for some of the disappointment. So we'll get into what went so horribly wrong next. It's the Hoffman Show on the Team 980 and always live on the free Odyssey app. Show. We're on the Team 980. We are always live on the free Odyssey app. Hey, Anthony, did you know that the mics work better when you put it right in front of your face? If you talk down here and the mic's at your chin, it doesn't sound nice and rich.
No, it does
like
not.
this. I'm just going to keep the show going. We're talking about the Washington Wizards. We'll talk WNBA draft coming up at the top of the hour. Who are the Mystics eyeing at 6? And just how hard is the transition going to be, even for Caitlin Clark, arguably the best player in the history of the college game, certainly the best of modern times at that guard position. But how hard is the transition to the W game? Sabrina Merchant of The Athletic has written about both of those things, and she will join us at 6 p.m. But Anthony, we got the positives out of the way. We talked about the bright spots. We talked about how close are they and had a realistic discussion. What's your next question about the Wizards?
Oh my gosh, Craig.
They finished their season yesterday with the NBA's second worst record. Yikes.
You got to start with the good and then end with the bad.
Okay.
And here, I'm here to ask you, what were the biggest disappointments from the season this year? And don't forget the Wes Unseld firing as well.
Yeah, I would say I have two major disappointments. One is the coaching job that Wes Unseld did. I guess, well, that is multi-tiered, so I'll save that one for a second. The first is just, it's related to that, is Jordan Poole. I mean, and it's not so much like you're disappointed in Jordan as a person, because I understand that guy worked his tail off all year and that we saw results at the end, that wasn't lip service from everybody over at the Wizards, who, no matter who you asked over there, would tell you he's a great kid, he's working hard, we're really hoping that it turns around for him. He put in the work, and the last quarter of the season, he got terrific results. Solid shooting percentages, 23 or 22, I think, wound up being the number-ish, points per game. The free throw shooting came back. He was 90+% from the line during that stretch, which was like another awkward, weird thing that he wasn't hitting free throws. Like, this dude would take technicals over Steph Curry in Golden State. He was that good of a free throw shooter. And so, like, to know that he put in the work is great, but you still have to go. He played like 50+ games of pretty terrible basketball, which, again, I don't say as a shot at him personally. I mean to just give you the raw analysis of, oh my God, that was awful basketball. From the missed shots to the turnovers to the just incomprehensibly bad defense. And I remember we were talking about it in the middle of the season on the show, and the question I would ask, and I don't think there is a good answer here, is if I'm Jordan Poole, watching Jordan Poole on tape play defense, do I think that I'm doing a good job? Because there were just times where you're like, that's not good enough from an effort standpoint. That's not good enough from a technique standpoint. Like, you have got to be able to make it, at least don't, if you give up a drive, don't give up a straight line drive. Like, just be a bit of a nuisance. Make the offensive player pretend like you are there, like you exist. And I think that then folds into the coaching part of it. I like Wes Unseld Jr. personally a lot. I think he's a very smart basketball mind. I said all this stuff when he got fired. But he did just a ridiculously bad job this year. And I know it's one thing to say, like, they weren't trying to win. But ultimately his job is to try to win. And that involves not only strategy and mixing up defenses and doing some things, but it requires, first and foremost, the thing that he got fired for was a lack of accountability. And guys like Poole, who were not playing up to their level, not for shots not going in, or, I do think it took Jordan a long time to kind of cope with the trade and how everything went down with the punch in Golden State, like all that stuff. Like, I just think as a human being, I have such a high level of empathy for Poole, especially seeing how it ended, where you're like, no, like, he still got it in there, and he was working through it, right? So But beyond that, like there just wasn't a level of accountability for bad play, bad decisions, poor performances, and the symptom of that was nothing ever changed. No lineup changes, no nothing outside of injuries, and the rotation stayed the same. And it's just like, hey, this is a season where you're trying to try stuff, and that's why I was so happy to hear Will Dawkins, when they moved on from Unseld, say like we're now in kind of experimentation season. And Brian Keefe is going to try a bunch of stuff. And they try different defenses. They try different offensive strategies and roles and put the ball in different guys' hands. And ultimately, they put the ball in Jordan's hands. And it's like, duh. My God, you play the point guard at point guard, and he produces like he used to at, point guard. And so I think that just the incredibly poor, like, and I'll even use this word. This is the word I think I like the most for it, Anthony, is it's an inexplicably bad job by Wes Unseld over the first 50-plus games. And I say inexplicably out of respect for Wes. He's too smart and too good of a person and cares too much and, like, is too thoughtful and too well-respected to do the job that he did. It made no sense. And that stacked loss after loss after loss. And I give a lot of people around the organization credit for keeping it together. And then ultimately Winger for making the move, and Dawkins for making the move. And Brian Keefe, I don't know that it's one of the things I want to find out this week on the show, is we'll have some guests on to talk about it. Like, should Brian Keefe be in consideration for this job, considering he only won, 8 games? I think they were 8-31 in his 39 games, but they were definitely more competitive. They definitely played smarter basketball, and they were hurt for a lot of that. And so it just comes down to the talent deficit. They got beat by better teams on a consistent basis, but at least they competed. And so I think when you look at the disappointments, it's Poole's performance in a vacuum, and then the decision-making and the lineups and all of the coaching job that it was inexplicably bad from Unseld that leads you to having the second worst record in the league. Those, to me, are the two, like, outstanding disappointments.
Yeah, and I think on the coaching front, the accountability piece, I think that was the biggest part, just because if guys aren't being held accountable, they're just going to, keep doing the same thing over and over again, and it's going to continue to result in loss after loss after loss. And eventually you end up being that team that you tweeted out that you didn't want to end up being that team. So,
yeah.
What a season, man. What a season.
Can I do one more disappointment? And this is going to be a bit of a wacky, but I'm going to do it anyway.
Sure.
As media members, one of the things that you strive to get is access, right? Like, it's really nice when a team is like, yeah, come in, or we'll tell you this thing. And specifically, there's a kind of access you get as a features reporter that is different and special. And when it's done right, you have no idea the reporter's there until the thing comes out, and then the reporter paints a complete picture of the time that they spent with the subject, period, right? And so the best example of this in recent journalism is Wright Thompson's piece on Caitlin Clark. It is unbelievable journalism from he got access to her for a lot of the year. He was able to stop in and out of the Iowa program. The coaches talked to him. He got to go to Caitlin's birthday dinner with her parents. There was a ton of access, and the story that Wright Thompson wrote was unbelievably good. It is so worth your time if you haven't seen it yet. Then there's whatever the ESPN reporter did with the Wizards. He got 8 days of full access. He got to go to work with Michael Winger, someone that we've been trying. This is not a shot at the Wizards. Winger's trying to hang back. I get it. We're hoping to have either Michael or Will later on in the week. But we would love to have, Michael Winger on and to be able to ask questions and to get to go behind the scenes in practice and all of these kinds of things, to get the kinds of access that this feature reporter did with the Wizards. And he published a story last week that basically hadn't been updated since February 15th. We talked about there was just this unbelievable downtrodden version of Jordan Poole that was maybe accurate when the story was reported in late January, right before Unseld was fired. And there were some interesting tidbits and like there was some good stuff in there, but it just ignored the fact that the last month and a half existed where like Poole turned it around and was scoring 23 to 25 a night and 8 assists, and his turnovers were down and the shot selection was better and the Wizards were competing and the vibe around the team was different. Like, it just ignored all of that. And it was freaking weird, man. So, yeah, that's not to, like, defend the Wizards or anything. Nobody asked me to do that. I read that story and was like, what the bleep is this? This is a stupid use of really valuable real estate given to a reporter who just totally screwed it up. So, yeah, that was my other disappointment. I thought when I saw the headline, we were going to get a really cool insight into the Wizards, and instead we got one that was 2.5 months old.
Nah, I feel you on that one.
That's my story, and I'm sticking to it. WNBA draft is tonight. It is dominating. We flipped on Good Morning America this morning, and one of the top headlines was, hey, WNBA draft tonight. Let's talk about it with someone who covers it all year long. A women's basketball writer, Sabrina Merchant from The Athletic, joins us next. Hoffman Show, wrapping up hour 3 here on the Team 980 with you until 6:45 tonight. We got Capitals hockey, critical game for them. Will be heard tonight here on the Team 980. But all eyes in the sports world are on New York, the WNBA draft, and it's our pleasure to welcome in Sabrina Merchant to talk about it, the Athletic staff writer covering women's basketball, college, WNBA. She does it all. Sabrina, thanks so much for your time and welcome to the show. Appreciate it on a busy one.
Thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. So I want to talk about the Mystics, obviously, locally here in a second. They're going to have some potentially really interesting options at 6. But we can start with the headliner, that Caitlin Clark. She's got a couple of eyes on her. And you wrote a piece for The Athletic where you talked to a couple people about what the transition will be like for her. Ultimately, as you come away from reporting that and add your own, your own observations and your own experience to it, what do you think Clark's rookie season will look like with the Indiana Fever?
It's interesting. I hadn't realized what, not to say a low bar, but just statistically what rookies have been able to accomplish in the WNBA until I started reporting that. Only 3 rookies have ever even averaged 20 points per game. And within the last 20 years, only 2 rookies have averaged 5 assists per game. And Clark obviously just shattered those numbers when she was at Iowa. So it's interesting to think that even if she takes a dip from what she was able to do in college, she could still be one of the most productive rookies of all time. And I think that's really what I came away with, is that she has so many different skill sets that she'll be able to contribute when she gets to Indiana, that even if defenses are able to take away some of the scoring, or, she's not able to get into the paint and drive and kick and things of that nature, there's so many other things she can do on a basketball court that something is going to translate. And I think, she's in contention to be on that Olympic team. She'll be in the conversation for an all WNBA team at the end of the year. I do think it's going to be a productive season for her, even if it's not, 32 points and 8 rebounds and 8 assists per game like we saw in her senior year at Iowa.
How does she pair from a basketball standpoint with Aaliyah Boston? Who obviously, I can't imagine what that was like for Aaliyah to watch, all the coverage as she's sitting there at the desk,
Right.
and just a rising star that's going to take all of our jobs on the media side whenever she wants to. But she's also, by the way, awesome at basketball. Obviously, last year's #1 overall pick for those that don't know. But how do they fit from like a basketball pairing schematic standpoint?
Yeah, what an interesting experience for Leah Boston to be watching that South Carolina-Iowa game. All of her former
Right.
teammates up against her future teammates. Just a win-win all around.
Yes.
But I think, you look at Clark's first 3 years at Iowa and how well she paired with Monica Sinano, a really strong pick-and-roll post-up center. And Aaliyah Boston is just factually better at everything than Monica Sinano was. She's extremely athletic. She's a great screener, a great roller. Scores really well inside. So I think that 2-player combo is going to be the foundation of everything Indiana runs. And just defensively, I don't think Clark's ever had a big behind her who could do the things that Aaliyah Boston does in terms of protecting the rim. So it really gives her some cover in terms of defending on the perimeter.
One thing about the W is, like, you have to defend at a high level in that league. Like, even compared to the intensity of defense compared to the NBA. It's much more what I would consider like NBA playoff intensity. The intensity of Caitlin's defense at Iowa didn't have to be the highest on most nights. That was not her responsibility. She could let Gabby Marshall and others go dog the opponent's best guards. How concerned were the folks that you talked to in your reporting about how her transition, about her ability to turn it up on the defensive end, to play WNBA caliber defense?
Yeah, I think that's a really great point. First of all, just because there isn't anybody for her to hide on, right? There's such a high level of talent in the WNBA that every team you're going to play has 2 or 3 perimeter threats. So it's not like you can just say, hey, Kelsey Mitchell, you take the good one and I'll take the bad one. There aren't any bad ones in the WNBA. So like you said, you have to be on right away. And I think the thing that I came across when I was talking to people around the league was just there's going to be some extra effort when it comes to players going up against Caitlin. Like, they're going to want to involve her a little bit more often. They're going to want to get by her. They're going to want to make her look a little silly on defense. It's just a natural instinct when someone comes in with that much hype. So I do think that she's going to be tested quite a bit individually, defensively. And that's okay because she has a lot of the physical tools you'd want for a good defender. She's really big. Obviously, she's in excellent condition. And it's not like she needs to save all of her energy and all of her fouls for the offensive end because she doesn't carry as much of a load on that end as she did when she was in college. So I do think that side of the floor is going to be a bigger transition for her just because it wasn't something that she excelled at in college. But I think in that system in Indiana where she has strong defensive players around her, where she is less relied on the offensive end, she'll be able to give more of her energy there. And I don't think we're ever going to talk about Caitlin Clark as an all-defense type player, but I think she'll get to the point where she's perfectly passable on that end and it's not hurting her or her team.
Right. And that is one thing about Caitlin that I'm not sure even players in the league and watching some of the commentary on Twitter, which is obviously where you should go for the best, material always.
Absolutely.
But, watching them watch her, I don't know that players in the W realize just how big and fast she is, that she is a legit 6 feet. She has, from a scouting, if you're talking to a scout, they'd be like, yeah, no, she's got a thick lower half. She's got a base underneath her, from an athletic sense.
Mm-hmm.
I do wonder if maybe she'll be better on that front. And as someone who has gotten the chance to watch her up close, did it surprise you, for instance, the first time you saw her, especially as a senior, because she has worked really hard in the weight room throughout her career at Iowa, when you saw her in person versus watching her on TV, the difference in what you saw?
Yeah, I think her body looks like somebody who can play at the WNBA level. I wouldn't say she's scrawny or anything. She definitely has the physical build. Like you said, she's worked really hard on building up her strength, and she is tall and long, and all of those things are going to serve her very well in the WNBA. I think most of it is what you alluded to earlier. It's just the effort. She's never been required to try that hard on the defensive end. It's you can go for steals sometimes, but otherwise let's save the energy. Let's make sure you don't collect too many fouls because we have to keep you in the game for 40 minutes. And I think just a change in perspective, that shift is going to help her a little bit where, we can't just make you be an offense-only player. That's just not going to work at this level.
Sabrina Merchant, staff writer at The Athletic, is with us here on the Hoffman Show. So the Mystics sit at 6 in this draft. I've seen, J.C. Sheldon from Ohio State mock to them. I've seen Aaliyah Edwards from UConn mock to them. I'd love to get a scouting report on those two. Let's start with Sheldon, the guard from Ohio State, probably the lesser known because people did watch Connecticut in mass. We know on that Friday night versus Iowa, but certainly that program is so well known. What's kind of the scouting report on J.C. Sheldon and why is she considered a top 7 pick in this draft?
I think she's just very translatable as a 3-and-D guard. She shot really well from three-point range over her last 2 seasons at Ohio State, took a high volume of them too, and a really good team defender. Obviously, Ohio State runs this press that makes it very easy for J.C. Sheldon to collect a lot of steals, so her stats look a little inflated from that respect, but even one-on-one, she's just good at staying in front of her guard and making sure that, the opponent doesn't really get into the paint. And again, like we were talking about Caitlin, just excellent conditioning. She plays a lot of minutes. She never seems to tire out. So you can just immediately see her slotting into a role player type function where, she can hit shots, she can defend her position, and she can, kind of run as a secondary ball handler if that's what you need.
And then for Aaliyah Edwards, the forward from UConn, what's the scouting report on her and how would she potentially fit next to Shakira Austin in D.C.?
Yeah, I think Aaliyah Edwards benefits because of the track record of UConn bigs coming into the league. Even the lesser heralded ones like Olivia Nelson-Adota or Dorka Juhas who came into the league last year, all of them have had a really high floor coming out of UConn, and Aaliyah Edwards probably has the highest floor out of any of them. She's just an excellent rebounder, excellent pick-and-roll player, defends really well inside. She needs to expand her shooting range a little bit, and that was tough at Connecticut because she was playing center for so long and was playing right up against the basket. But, with her and potentially Shakira Austin playing together, that's something that you'd like to see her work on is just that 15-foot jumper. And, you'd expect her to be able to develop that because she was a pretty decent free throw shooter at UConn. I think during her senior season, she made 75% of her free throws, same as her senior year. So you'd expect her to continue to develop those skills. And just like I said, all of those Huskies, they just come in with an incredible understanding of how the WNBA game works. They're so well prepared by Gino Auriemma. So I think, just coming out of that program, you have a lot of faith in what Aaliyah Edwards could be.
Shakira actually put out a tweet the other day asking Mystics fans who they want to see. And in a shocking turn of events, the number one response was Angel Reese from LSU. She is local-ish from Baltimore.
Baltimore zone, yeah.
I'm not going to try to start any DC Baltimore wars here on the radio show. I'm going to say local-ish. Everybody's happy with that description. Local-ish here to the Metro Atlantic area or the Mid-Atlantic area. But obviously, we saw what she can do in that last game against Iowa. 20 rebounds. She's been a tremendous player, a national champion. But I know there are real concerns with her offensive game not translating to the WNBA because her range is extremely limited. Where do scouts come in on her? And do you think there's any chance that Washington takes her?
Yeah, I think you kind of hit on the difficulty of projecting her offense because, like Aaliyah Edwards, Angel Reese did play out of position her senior year at LSU as well. You know, she's playing center, even though I think she's definitely going to have to be a power forward in the WNBA. But that means that, you know, all of her best gifts at being just this outstanding rebounder and finishing right at the rim, like that's a lot harder to do when you're a power forward and your center is also in the lane clogging up that space. So I think that's part of the difficulty with Angel is we don't know what, like, because she was obviously so productive at the college level, it's hard to know how many of those things she'll be able to do at the WNBA when she's playing at a different position. And even though she's an incredible athlete at the college level, like everybody in the WNBA is better athletes. So is her rebounding prowess going to show up the same way? I don't think she's the kind of player who would fit in Washington just because of the fact that Shakira Austin is already there as one of Washington's building blocks. I think you'd need someone with a little bit more ability to play out on the perimeter, which is not Angel Reese's best skill. I think she fits better with a floor spacing center, and that's just not what Shakira Austin is, even though Shakira can kind of operate at a high post. I don't think I love that combination of the two of them. I would be surprised if Washington ended up taking Angel, even though she is supremely talented. I think they would probably want someone who fits more naturally alongside Austin and Ariel Atkins.
Yeah, no, that would make a lot of sense. Stephanie Dolson, obviously, another UConn big they bring in the offseason who can shoot it from three and is a true center to let Shakira play that power forward spot. Seems to be more of the model. Two more questions for you real quick, Sabrina, as we're just now 30 minutes away from the WNBA draft. First, just to wrap up the draft side of this for the Mystics, any other names that you would keep an eye on for Washington when they get on the clock at 6?
I mean, I think it's going to be, as much as I know Mystics fans won't want to hear this, like a little bit of a runway for them to get back to contention. So maybe looking at some international prospects who might not be able to contribute in year one, but could look good going forward. I know one of the invitees to the green room was an Australian forward named Nadia Plotch, who's only 19 years old. So you obviously don't expect her to be great right away, but I think the Mystics have a little bit of time. So yeah, just keeping an eye on the international prospects, even though won't be super fun to watch them in the year 2024. But I think, you know, Mike Thibault's always done a really great job of drafting later too. So even keeping an eye on who they take in the second round could be interesting just as a flyer for this particular Mystic squad.
And then the last question is kind of just a big picture where the Mystics are. As you mentioned, this could be a long runway back to contention. Elena Deladon kind of steps away. I don't even know how that's officially being termed. She's not playing this year for Washington or currently for anybody else. Natasha Cloud leaves in free agency, and you just kind of have what feels like an exodus and a start over the year after they hand the job from Mike Thibault to Eric. And I'm just curious, like as someone who's plugged in around the league, what folks think of that a year in and kind of the state of the Mystics franchise.
I think there was generally high returns on how Eric performed in year one. You know, there was obviously a lot to deal with Washington in terms of all of their injuries and just personnel shakeups. And even though they did finish in the 7th seed and exited in the first round of the playoffs, I think there was pretty much respect for how he handled that job in year one as a rookie head coach. So I think, you know, not that I expect a shakeup there, but I think you're in good hands heading forward with Eric as the head coach. But just as far as like Washington's future, I mean, I think you can pretty confidently project them to be a lottery team this year, just looking at Indiana obviously taking a step up. Phoenix and Seattle, who were both lottery teams last year, made big splashes in free agency. You obviously already mentioned Natasha Cloud, who left from Washington to go to Phoenix. So I think it's going to be a lot harder to get into the playoffs. And just based on, the letter that Mike Tebow wrote to the fans about, just asking for a little patience, this is going to be a bit of a process. I would expect this year to be a rebuilding year, trying to see what you have on those training camp contracts like Emily Engsler and, Dee Richards, see what you have with Queen Egbo still. Like, there's a lot of intriguing young talent that may be a factor in the next great Mystics team, but I think this year is more about discovery than anything.
Yeah, Paige Becker's watched some games courtside last off season for her. I just think next year, if she wants to switch sides and be on the bench courtside seats, that would be cool. That the Mystics certainly could be in position.
Would be a great fit.
Yeah, it would be. With that, her and Shakira, that would be fun. Sign me up. Obviously, we got to wait a full year to see where the Mystics or I guess only a couple months to see where the Mystics finishes the W season, runs through the summer, and then obviously we'll see what Paige does after the season next year. Sabrina Merchant, if you want to read some stuff last minute, prepare yourself for the WNBA draft tonight. Highly recommend her mock draft and her coverage on Caitlin Clark's transition and as I said, the mock draft. Sabrina, thanks so much for your time. Great work as always, and hopefully we'll talk to you throughout the season.
Thank you.
All right, that's Sabrina Merchant with us here on the Hoffman Show. When we get back, actually, Ann, have I done us dirty here on the clock? I did us dirty here on the clock, didn't I? We were having
dirty.
Too much fun. Tell you what, we're still going to take a break. We're going to come back, and then Ant and I are going to talk about who we want to see go to Washington tonight. We'll do that quickly, then we'll wrap up the show with real things real people said into real microphones here on the Team 980. the Hoffman Show. We're on the Team 980. We're always live as well on the free Odyssey app. We are streaming live on YouTube at the Team 980 as well. Of course, you can leave your comments and all our on-demand content to be read Thursdays on Never Read the Comments, a segment we do each and every week. You can check that out if you missed last week's edition on YouTube. See, it's just a big, big circle of content. It's the circle of content. Bada-bump. No Lion King finish from you, Ant? I think the show needs to end. All right, we got about 22 minutes till you're done with us. Capitals hockey again coming up here in the next or by the end of the hour. John Walton and company taking you starting at 6:45. Okay, Anthony, WNBA draft is about a little over an hour away. I did a whoopsie on the math with Sabrina. I was thinking about the end of our show. I wasn't thinking about the actual time the draft starts, which is 7:30. Good job by me. I just had that realization in real time as it came out of my mouth. So the Mystics pick 6th. And I think, to me, this is kind of a best player available versus pick for need situation. Mm-hmm. And by the way, it was very hard for me because we've done just an absurd amount of NFL draft stuff. I almost started saying NFL draft to Sabrina instead of WNBA draft. I don't think I did. But just NFL draft on the brain this time of year. But you got Aaliyah Edwards, who's a stud and is probably one of the 5 best players in this draft. But depending on where the teams above them go, she might wind up falling to 6. And I think if she falls, basically what I've seen is either Aaliyah Edwards goes 5 and the Mystics take someone else, or Aaliyah Edwards drops to 5 and the Mystics just take her. I don't know that that's the best fit, but I do think it's she's the kind of talent where you just take it and you figure it out, even with Shakira Austin already on board.
Yeah, I just feel like, even looking at the Mystics roster, I just think we're in a weird situation, and we're at a weird draft spot. And it feels awfully like the Wizards. I feel like the Wizards are always in a weird draft spot. And I don't know. I'm going with best player available here, just looking at the roster per se. But if this was the year, a Paige Beckers or AZ Fudd, or, one of those other, dazzling guards were coming out this year, I think that's where we'll be going. We do have Syracuse has Daisha Fair. I think that would be too high of a draft pick, or I think it would be a bit of a reach, but I could see that kind of spark being needed for our offense, to be honest. I think offensively we go there.
Can we get the All-Syracuse backcourt? You got Brittany Sykes? Yeah, Slim's still around, right? She didn't leave.
She is.
She didn't leave.
Yes, she is.
So I'm not against that. It is too rich for her to go there. But it really does come down to does J.C. Sheldon get picked fit? Those are the 2 players that everyone is circling around. I'm looking at a couple of different mocks right now. Yahoo's got a kind of a conglomerate of mocks aggregated together. And Aaliyah Edwards from USA Today, New York Post, NBC Sports, CBS Sports, ESPN has them all, everyone but Michael Vopel at ESPN has Edwards 6 to Washington. And so it just really depends on where, in some ways it's whoever's at 5, makes the decision for Washington in that way. By the way, that would be the Dallas Wings. So in some ways, I kind of hope it's Sheldon. I love Aaliyah Edwards as a player. But Sheldon's the right fit. She averaged almost 18 a game. She can shoot it. She's tenacious defensively.
Yep, I like her.
That would be the Mystics getting a guard who's a pain in the butt to be the spearhead of their team, and that's the kind of guard that you want to build around. Now she's listed as a shooting guard, not necessarily a point guard. So, you wind up getting a backup, or do they try to convert her into a point? Do they play her next to Sykes? I think you have some questions there. I mean, you play Sykes on the wing. Brittany Sykes is a basketball player.
But I think last year they did a good job. Like when the injury started to pile up, Brittany,
Yeah.
she was the one that was taking over at the point.
Yeah.
And she was really getting to it, Craig. I'm not going to lie.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's the best position for her, but I think it worked out for her.
For whatever it's worth, most everyone thinks that that Angel Reese is going to go 7, which is the pick after Washington, because Chicago traded up to that pick. So everyone's like, oh, they've got someone circled. Reese is the person that you would need to trade up for there. So very good chance that she goes 7. For whatever it's worth, Daisha Fair is mocked in Michael Vopel. He did a full 3-round mock draft, mocked to the Aces at 16. Daisha's only 5'5", so that's tough. But I mean, get a little scoring punch off the bench, because God forbid there's not enough scoring in Las Vegas.
Not enough.
If Kelsey and Asia and Jackie and Candace and whoever else are off on that night,
Good gracious.
Crazy. They have Washington taking Tiana Jackson, center out of Kansas, in the second round, and then where's Washington? Brenda Maxwell, shooting guard out of Gonzaga, in the third. So we'll see that. Other names that you might know: Kate Martin, projected as a 3rd-round pick for the Sparks. So good for Kate Martin. Of course, the Iowa teammate of Caitlin Clark. Elizabeth Kitley was probably going to be a 1st-round pick until she tore her ACL for Virginia Tech. So unfortunately, that injury, I think it was a torn ACL, but she had a knee injury, missed the tournament, was going to be a 1st-rounder. Now mocked 20th to Atlanta. Let's see, who else? Charisma Osborne, 14. She was at UCLA. Nika Mule, the guard out of UConn, to New York Liberty at 11. Get a dog defensively. And yeah, those are the big names. Obviously, top pick will be Clark. Cameron Brink out of Stanford, the 2nd pick. Camila Cardozo from South Carolina, expected to go 3. Can you imagine Cardozo and Angel together? Jesus. And then Ricky Jackson, the small forward out of Tennessee, is the widely presumed 4th pick. So that's getting going here shortly on ESPN, about an hour from now. When we get back, we'll wrap up the show with real things real people said into real microphones. Hoffman Show wrapping up here on the Team 980, always live as well on the free Odyssey app. Of course, tonight, how are you guys wrapping up? Don't you have a show till 7? Not tonight, not tomorrow night, because with the Nats and Caps as the two teams playing in DC this week, your boys get to welcome the Caps on over to the Team 980. They, of course, are hosting the Boston Bruins tonight. Their season is basically on the line. So we will see if the Caps, who currently are there, right there at the bottom of the playoff picture, if they can get it done against a Boston team that's already clinched and is better than them, but who knows? It's playoff hockey, baby, basically, here tonight on the Team 980. All right, and what do we got tomorrow? There's a chance we have been emailing with the folks over at the Mystics. I think we're going to have the draft pick on tomorrow. So whoever the Mystics take at 6 tonight, hopefully is live with us on the show tomorrow. We'll obviously have other coverage of the WNBA draft as well tomorrow and the reaction. We have part 2 of our conversation with Dane Brugler tomorrow from Take Command. If you want to just listen to that now, you don't have to wait for us to play it on the radio. We do as a courtesy for folks that are not as into podcasts. But we'd love for you to subscribe to the Take Command podcast and just you can listen now. Mike Golick Jr., the episode with him will be in your podcast feed Wednesday morning. Charles Davis next week. So we are loaded up as we get ready with all eyes on Detroit. I also know that I think the question we're going to ask tomorrow is, how willing are you to trade up into the first round on for an offensive tackle for the Commanders? And I think what's going to happen is I'm going to change a lot of people's minds. I think a lot of people are going to be like, yes, you have to do it. And then by the end of the hour, people are going to be like, maybe not.
Yeah. You definitely changed mine.
Yeah, I think it just depends on who's available, which is fun because we're not going to know till next Thursday, which means that we get to stay tuned. Like, it should be an easy night of work. The Commanders pick second. We do the stuff. We go home. No. We got to wait and see what the rest of the draft is like, just in case they want to trade back up. So that's mostly what we got for tomorrow. Anything else already on the docket? I do feel like we've done some planning ahead this week.
Yeah, we got Linnell.
Have we confirmed that? Or are we going to say that, and then he'll wind up being on Thursday?
It's a great question. That has not been confirmed.
Okay, I'm going to guess he's on Wednesday or Thursday.
And then also, we may have Kareem Copeland.
Oh, we will have Kareem Copeland. We already booked that.
Okay.
Kareem and I are going to connect before he gets on the train to come back. So we'll talk WNBA draft. We'll talk about whoever the Mystics pick and how that player fits and the long-term plans and the short-term plans. And we'll do about 10 minutes with Kareem on the W draft. So that's tomorrow. Anything else left for today?
Oh, yes. We have this thing called Real Things Real People Say into Real Microphones.
Real things.
We're not going to be sucked this year.
Real people.
5 and 11. Not very good.
Said into real microphones.
You know, the culture is actually damn good.
Ladies and gentlemen, Anthony has officially produced enough shows for me that he can now do the Real Things toss. Wow. I mean, what a job that was out of you.
Thank you, man.
Incredible.
Thank you.
Just flawless into Real Things here. All right. What do we got for today, Ant? What real things did real people say into real microphones? You know, we got honestly, this might be the only one we do. We might just have an all Boban version of Real Things today. And it's not even things that Boban said. It's Boban inciting reactions on the final day of the NBA's regular season. First, he took the jump ball against someone who was much shorter than him. This was a jump ball, I think, in the fourth quarter of the Rockets-Clippers game yesterday. And this is how it sounded on Clippers television.
Hey,
You can tell there's nothing on the line. Xavier Moon.
He won the tip! Oh, my goodness!
105-100.
Oh, my God. He did it. It was pretty crazy to watch because Boban's like 7'4".
And the guy was like 6 feet.
Xavier Moon's not. How big is Xavier Moon?
He's 6 feet.
He's not 6 feet.
Yes, he is.
He's 6 feet?
Yes. 6 feet. Insane.
Dang.
That's pretty impressive, man.
Played his college. 29-year-old from Goodwater, Alabama, played his college ball at Northwest Florida State and then transferred to Morehead State.
Okay.
From Coosa or Central Coosa High School in Hanover, Alabama.
Oh, Southern boy.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure. Good job, Xavier Moon. Also, good job, Boban. I have a semi-serious take on this very funny thing that happened in the fourth quarter of yesterday's game.
Fans are getting excited here. There might potentially be some free chicken on the board if he misses the second free throw.
Oh, man, free chicken on the board.
Yeah, so that's why the fans are getting a little frothy.
Oh, they're pointing to you. Boban's playing with the crowd. Say, you want chicken?
Here's your job.
Oh, he gave him chicken. He's a man of the people. He's a man of the people.
He did that on purpose?
He did. He gave out free chicken.
So if you couldn't catch that from the incredible television call of what just happened, Boban is at the free throw line. He missed the first free throw. He knows if he misses both, the crowd gets free chicken. He misses it. He acknowledges it. He points to the people. Everyone's laughing, having a good time. And then the worst people in the world get on Twitter and have real serious takes about this. And my serious take is that those serious takes are rubbish. Here's why. People are upset because he messed with the integrity of the game. And that's important because of gambling. Bleep you guys. Seriously. Bleep you guys. You don't get to control the game. That's why it's called gambling. And if Boban wants to be a man of the people and give people chicken, that's what you get for betting on the game. So is there a real, the reason this is funsy and okay is because it had no bearing on the NBA playoff situation. The Clippers were locked into their seed. The Rockets have long been eliminated. This is a fun and games situation. It wasn't like the game was on the line. Of course you play to win. Of course the integrity of the game is really important. And there are elements of this where it is really important from a gambling standpoint to understand that this needs to be, there's elements of the game that need to be done well and done right because there are millions of dollars on the line. A player deciding to have a little bit of fun and give people chicken is part of the risk you take. And guess what? If the total is 1 point under because Boban could have hit that free throw and you're mad at Boban because he gave other people chicken instead of you money, then that's what you get for gambling on a meaningless regular season game on a Sunday when you could be outside. I have no problem with sports gambling at all. I have no problem with a lot of the real consternation about the integrity of the game. This was fun. This is all supposed to be fun. And all of you that have arms in the air about Boban giving people chicken are taking the fun out of it. We'll see you tomorrow.